All right, the time is at 2:01. We shall start. A very good afternoon to all the parents. Welcome to Positive Parenting webinar series. This is a three-part webinar, and today is the first webinar entitled The Power of Positive Parenting. Thank you, parents, for making time to join us this afternoon. And Positive Parenting Program, or as we call it, Triple P, is an evidence-based program, and it's based on more than 40 years of research and proven to be effective in helping parents. Let's go through some house rules in order for us to have a seamless learning experience. So strictly no recording of the seminar is allowed. Kindly rename yourself to your registration name and your child's school name for attendance taking purposes. This is a parenting program, so children are discouraged from attending. Right, so we also want to encourage a reminder for all of us to be respectful to the trainer, administrative staff, and other participants, as we express ourselves through the chat box. Do mute your audio, especially those of you who, sometimes when you use a mobile phone, you could accidentally unmute yourself. So be mindful of that. And do use the chat box, right, to pose any parenting related questions. So my name is Holbert Lewis. So I've been working as a family life educator for the past more than 12 years. I have two adult daughters. My older daughter, Rachel, is currently working as a teacher, teaching in secondary school in Singapore, teaching English and literature. My younger daughter, Renee, is currently pursuing postgraduate studies in sociology in California. So every Monday, my wife and I will Zoom her to just catch up with her. She's living in California, like a 12-hour difference, just to catch up with her. Yeah. Right, so in today's webinar, we will begin by talking about the joys and realities of being a parent. Then we'll just explore a little bit about children's behavior, which is probably one of the most stressful part of parenting. Then I'll introduce positive parenting, and then the 5 key principles in today's webinar in positive parenting. And we'll close it out with question Q&A time. So parents, you feel free if throughout the course of the webinar, if any questions pop up in your head, feel free to just post it on the chat box. From time to time, I will check on the chat box to try to address whatever questions you have. I want to encourage you to do ask questions. Or if you prefer, you can save it during the Q&A time at the end. Now, I do want to make our webinars interactive, so I think most of you will prefer that. So from time to time, I'll ask ideas or suggestions in the chat box. I do want to encourage you all to respond, right, in the chat box. And I hope you have downloaded the worksheets that we emailed you. If you have, you can use it to help you as a guide. Now, if you have not, no worries, you can still follow along. And a reminder, parents, because all of us, we have our videos off. And I just want to encourage all of you to really give your attention, to really listen to the webinar, because sometimes when we're at home, we can be multitasking, So I do want to encourage all of you to, at this point for the next hour or so, try to put that on pause and to really listen to the webinar so that you can get the best out of it. Sometimes if you just learn 1 or 2 strategies and you practice it in your parenting, it will make a big difference. It will help to reduce your parenting stress. Okay, so think about it. So I do want to encourage all of you to give your attention. Yes, so there's a question that one of you expressed you did not get a worksheet. Doesn't matter, Ian, I think it was supposed to be been emailed, sometimes, things happen. Maybe you may have gone to a junk mail or something like that. So firstly, for those of you, as you registered, you were asked to submit a question, and a lot of you did. And I want to thank you for submitting those questions. And so many of you, your main question seems to be on motivation. How do you motivate your child in their academics and their homework? So I guess this seems to be our main concern. And there were also questions on on how to encourage social skills and independent skills, and to build up your confidence. Now I've put in it in I've color coded it in blue, because these are questions that we will address in the second webinar. All right, in the second webinar we will talk about those things. Then there were also questions on how to manage your child's emotions. A lot of you talk about sometimes your child go into meltdown, and you have few of you ask questions on special needs and mental health issues, like how to manage their thoughts. Now, these will be addressed mainly in the last webinar. All right. So there was also questions on how to manage non-compliance, how to help your children in their learning, in the enhanced communication with your children and sibling relationships, and to manage screen time, to help them to be compliant. So some of these issues I will definitely address in our webinar today. All right, so thank you once again. So we'll try to address all of your concerns. Now, imagine if you were to come up, with this employment opportunity online, how would you respond? One couple to raise a child, no experience necessary. Applicants must be available 24 hours per day, 7 days a week, and must provide food, shelter, and clothing, and supervision. No training provided and no salary. Okay, but not only there is no salary, but you have to pay at least 180,000 over the next 18 years. And single people may apply, but should be prepared for twice the work. I think you all should know what I'm talking about here. Okay, so this is actually what parenting is all about. Imagine if you were to come across this for an employment opportunity, would you take up this job offer? I'm sure most of you would not, right? But this, just to illustrate the reality, the demands of parenting, right? So there's no escape from that. Parenting is demanding, but sometimes parents, there's always the other side of parenting, isn't it? Where parenting is also fulfilling and meaningful. But sometimes when we get so caught up with the nitty-gritty of parenting, we can forget why we choose to become parents. I'm assuming all of us chose to be a parent. Okay. All right. So to help us to remind us why we became a parent, I'm going to show you this short video on the best thing about being a mom or dad.
The best thing about being a mum is looking at the little people that I've created and thinking, I've done this, and I've done this all by myself, and I just love that, and seeing the smiles on their face and that they're so happy and content with life and just so innocent.
The best thing about being a mum is just feeling unconditional, eternal love, which you could never even imagine in a million years that you would have. And it's also looking at someone who loves you nearly as much as you love them, which is amazing.
The best thing about being a dad is, I wake up in the morning and I know I have this amazing person who carries my genes. He carries part of me in him. And I think for me, that it's just beautiful. Like, no one could ever take that away from me. It's just nice to know that, oh, wow, I have another life that I can look out to. And it gives me responsibilities and things to do with. You know, we have lots of fun. We have our banter moment. As the years go on, you know, you learn to adjust and balance between being the dad and being having that friendship with your child.
I think every day is so different. Like, you never have the same day twice. And I think as well, like, I do a lot of things by month. So I've been doing her like handprints and her footprints, and I video it all the time because, like, when she first started, she had no interest. Like, she was just letting me get on with it. And now she takes so much interest in things, and you're literally watching them grow and exploring and learning. And she literally is so alert and content with everything. She'll just get on with it or entertain herself, like right now.
All right. So I hope that reminds you, just to give you a reminder why you chose to be a parent. Okay. And so sometimes, you know, we got to see there's two sides of parenting. That's the demanding part. But let's not get too caught up with it that we forget the meaning and the fulfillment part of being a parent. And the theme of our workshop is becoming the parent you want to be. Right? That is the theme of our workshop series. So I believe, parents, there's different times in your life. You probably thought of this when you were a child, maybe when you experienced a negative experience with your own parents, and you probably thought, when I become a parent one day, I will never do that. I bet some of you thought of that, right? You know, and you think about it, you know, when you first got married, probably you had that thought, the kind of parent you want to be. The first time when you realized you got pregnant, you probably had that thought. But sometimes it's easy for us to forget that, right? We get caught up with the demands of life. And today I just want the idea behind having this theme is to remind all of us why you became a parent, and to even think about the kind of parent you want to be, right? And I think to really be more in touch with ourselves, our principles, our values, our priorities, and sometimes it become easy for us to lose touch of that. So I hope this webinar will help you to actually be in touch with that. So being a parent, you know, we all know it's demanding, as I mentioned, it's frustrating, it's exhausting, right? This is the reality of parents. There's no escaping that. But as I mentioned, it's also rewarding and enjoyable. Okay. And we all know that parenting is primarily trial and error, right? You all agree. We learn from trial and error. You know, there's no magic formula. Wow, chun, we do this, guarantee, magic, ping, everything will solve. We know there's no such thing, right? And then, you know, we can learn from webinars like even today, and you can read a book. You know, you can go online. There's so many resources out there. But ultimately, parents, you have to decide what kind of parent you want to be. What are your goals? What kind of values that you want to impart on your child, right? It's really up to you. You got to decide. That's why we have this theme, becoming the parent that you want to be. And I think we all have hopes of the kind of children that we want to raise, right? You know, children who are well-adjusted, children who have certain skills. You know, in positive parenting, we also emphasize one of our goals as parents is to nurture skills in our children, skills like communication, their needs, how to get on, you know, social skills, how to give their best in whatever they are doing, how to manage their emotions, right? How to feel good about themselves. So these are things in which we as parents can play a role, you know, in how we help our children develop their worldview, how they view, in the way they view themselves and the way they view the world. You know, we have a big part in developing them. And to provide that home environment, a secure, loving home environment. All right, so I want to take a moment and talk about anxieties, parental anxieties. How many of you, I mean, let's face it, other than the demands of parenting, there's also the reality of the anxieties of parents, right? Correct? You know? And we get, and I just want to ask all of you, is it good to have parental anxieties or not? How many of you like to respond in the chat box? Yes or no? Is it, you just type out Y and no, or N. Is it good? Is it helpful to have parental anxieties? Some of you said no. Okay, there's a few who say yes. Okay, all right, so there you are. It's an interesting question, isn't it? I think sometimes when it comes to matter of safety, right, and health, when we have anxieties, we show more concern, we protect our children. I think those are good. But on the other side as well, parental anxieties can also, because we live in a very competitive environment, right? We tend to compare. Let's all be real here. We tend to compare with other kids, with other parents. And then a lot of times when you see another child doing better or another parent doing better, how does that affect us? I think if we are being honest, sometimes we get triggered, right? We get triggered, and then we then react to that. And then we end up living through our children. Do you know what I mean by living through our children? It's like we pursue our own agenda. It's like we are, without really considering our child, thinking about who is our child, what is their interest, right? What are their strengths? And rather than being child-centric, we can be very parent-centric. How many of you agree with that? Your parenting anxieties can cause you to become overly competitive and you might lose your sense of self and react to the environment, right? So a lot of you agree. I think one of you said, yeah, I think it's okay for us to feel fear and anxiety. It's part of human life. This can show in our children, it's okay, but it's important for us to know how to manage, right? So I just want us to think about that, your parental anxiety. Now, the good thing is, the good news is, I just want to share, even my younger daughter, Renee, when she was born premature, 2 months premature. She weighed 1.7 kg. Can you imagine? And for the first 6 years of her life, we had a lot of health issues that we had to deal with. But today she's doing really well. Okay. So I'm just here to reassure you, a lot of our parental anxieties, at that point of time, we get very anxious, but generally, as you can see from this survey, things turn out okay. We will grow in our confidence and we will find that parenting is still rewarding and fulfilling. All right, now let's talk a little bit about children's behavior, which I think a lot of us agree it's probably the toughest part of parenting. All right, so some of you have submitted your question. Some of you asked this question, how to manage a child's tantrum. This is a toddler tantrum, but the principle is still the same. How to manage tantrum, right? It's not an easy issue to deal with. Now, before I share the Triple P strategies, I'm going to show you a fun video. Okay, so this one is not Triple P, Let me qualify. This is a fun video of how a father managed temper tantrum. Let's watch.
What's the best way to handle a toddler temper tantrum? I found this is the best parenting method. All you need is a full bottle of wine. Step 1, open wine. Step 2, pour wine liberally. Step 3, drink wine until screaming stops.
Okay, it's just humor, all right? This is not a strategy, it's just, hopefully by the end of the webinar, you will learn something, how to actually manage your child's tantrum. But it's just to help us to see sometimes we feel helpless, and that's normal, right? That's normal. Yeah. Okay, so the thing about children's behavior, we got to see that some misbehavior is normal. We got to manage our expectation, right? And some discipline problems is unavoidable. We cannot have this expectation that there shouldn't be any problem. There will be, right? It's part of parenting. But I think the key thing here is if we can learn to manage effectively the common everyday problem like disobedience, refusal to go to sleep when they are young. If we handle it when they are young, hopefully we lay a foundation and prevent more serious behavior from happening. Serious behavior like lying, stealing, and misbehavior in school, right? So the key thing is laying a good foundation. It's preventative, and Triple P is all about preventative, laying a good foundation. Today, I'll share with you how you can lay a good foundation. All right. So that is it's what Triple P is all about. All right. So Triple P, let me just share a little bit about Triple P, or Positive Parenting Program. All right. So it's basically to promote a child's development and manage their behavior and emotions in a positive way. I think today, in our present setup, mental health is also important, right? This is not something 20, 30 years ago we talk about, but today we recognize it's an issue that we need to address, and how you manage their behavior is important. We've got to build strong relationships. You've got to have good communication, right? Emphasize the positive, right? Sometimes if we all grew up in different environment, right? And we also talk about planning ahead. So a lot of Triple P strategies is to prevent problems, all right? Is to actually, so much of what we do is to actually prevent, and I'll share with you more about that. As we say, prevention is better than cure, right? So we'll also use everyday situations and create opportunities to learn. Try to make things organic as much as we can, to go with the flow of the child. So evidence has shown Triple P program has helped child develop their skills, do better in school, build friendships, and feel good about themselves and so forth, right? And have lesser behavioral and emotional problems. And there's also benefits for the parents, because we grow in our confidence and competencies, and we have less conflict with our partners, with our children, and also less mental health issues like stress and depression. We'll reduce our parenting stress. All right, so it's always good to learn some principles to help you, to develop your parenting competencies. And these are some of the skills that a child needs, good communication, social skills, ability to manage their feelings, independent skills, and problem-solving skills. And we'll be sharing a lot about this in the next 3 webinars, how you can promote these skills in your children. All right, so now I now introduce to you the 5 core principles of positive parenting. So firstly, is having a safe and interesting environment. Secondly, having a positive learning environment. Thirdly, using assertive discipline. Fourth, having a realistic expectations. And finally, taking care of yourself as a parent. So we'll go through each of them one at a time. We'll define what it is, and then we'll share strategies how you can promote these principles, right, as a parent. Okay, let's begin with the first principle, which is having a safe, interesting environment. All right, so how do you create a safe, interesting environment? Develop predictable routines. I believe a lot of us know by now that it's important to have routines, right? You have morning routine, what time they wake up, what time to go off to school. Then we have the afternoon routine, after school routine when they come back, and then the night routine, right? It's good to have routine. Now, why is that important? Because it helps the children feel secure, and it gives them a sense of predictability, and that helps them in their development. When a child grows up in a predictable and familiar routine, it helps them in their development, all right? And it's also important for us to provide supervision, okay? Especially for younger kids, right? If we're dealing with primary school kids, they're still young kids. So what does supervision mean? That means we need to know at all times where is our children, who are they with, and what they are doing, correct? We need to be aware of these things, all right? So safety is important. Let me share a story, okay? I remember a time when my family, we were living in Penang. And there was one time, my children were younger. My younger daughter was probably like 8, 9 years old. And then there's one time we were going to the mall, and we went to a bookstore. So we were there at the bookstore for a while. And, I was getting distracted. Sometimes I get distracted when I go to the bookstore. Then I left the bookstore. When I was going out of the bookstore, because I remember I have two children, I realized, hey, my younger child is not with me. And at that point, I went into a panic mode. You know. I briefly looked at the bookstore. I couldn't find her. I went into a panic mode, you know. So I remember I go and alert the security, and I told her, even ask a stranger to help me. You know, I just run around the mall. You know, I thought my daughter got kidnapped or something like that, you know. And then later on, when I calmed down, I went back to the bookstore to look more carefully. Then in a isolated corner, my daughter was sitting down reading a book, and she was just mesmerized by the book. All right. Thank God, right? You know, the relief. So, you know, supervision is important, you know, especially when you go overseas, right? Yeah. So next thing is having interesting things to do. You know, we got to create an environment where our child is stimulated. They're learning, you know. Yeah, so that's important. Now, does that mean, I want to ask a question right now. The reason why you want them to stimulate, because when they get bored, what happens when the children get bored? It can lead to misbehavior, correct? So it's good to stimulate them, get them to have certain activity. But I want to ask a question: does that mean we have to occupy our children all the time? Yes or no? You can just answer with Y or N. Does that mean that we need to occupy our children all the time? Okay, a lot of you say no, right? Yes, yeah, and I agree with you. You know, sometimes parents feel that the children needs to be occupied all the time. The children's schedule needs to be filled all the time, right? Is that good? Sometimes, you know, experts have said that when a child is bored, it can actually help the child to be creative in figuring out how to pass their time. Right? It can help the child be creative. And that's where, you know, they can also learn to be independent, to occupy themselves independently. Because if you keep occupying them, they will be too dependent on you. All right. So you have to think about that. Right. Now let me check on the chat box. There were some comments. Yes, a certain level of boredom is good for the kids. I like that, Shobha. Thank you for sharing that. Right? Because a bit of boredom will help them be creative. Now, I want to talk about another thing. You know, a lot of you have submitted questions. You talked about a lot of it is schoolwork, right? And I just want to share some of the questions that you have asked. Like how to motivate children to excel and to be ambitious. How to reinforce the importance of schoolwork. How do we create interest in studies and for the students? How to help them to take ownership. How to help them to be more hardworking and less playful. There's even a question, how to pressure my child to study. Okay. When I see questions like that, I'm not saying it's wrong to ask this question. My concern is, parents, are we limiting their learning to just homework and performance in school? Is that the only setting for them to learn? You know? I want to encourage, you know, sometimes there's an expert who said there's two types of parent, a learning-oriented parent and a performance-oriented parent. Performance-oriented parent, we focus a lot on, okay, homework, must do your homework, must get good results. So, you know, so to the point where the child always, they look at schoolwork is like a chore, you know, they have to do the chore, you know, they have to do it, they must perform, they must finish off the homework. Is that healthy for the child? All right, so parents, I just want to encourage you all to think about it. Be more holistic in promoting learning. You know, learning is supposed to be inherent in a child. Every human being wants to learn. I believe that. It's inborn, you know. When a child is younger, if you notice, if you ever observe a child, when they are young, they always observe you. They want to learn. They want to learn how to tie your shoelace, their shoelace. They want to learn how to build a Lego. Children by nature, they want to learn. You know, a child wants to improve their knowledge. A child wants to improve their skills. So I just want to encourage parents, don't focus so much on performance. Focus more on learning. Talk about the joy of learning, right? You know, focus on learning. So learning can be, you know, social. You can learn from social setting. You can learn from even playing. By playing, you can learn. You learn to problem solve by playing. There's so many ways to learn. It's not just homework. You know, let's open up our mind. Don't narrow learning. be more broad-minded when it comes to learning, right? And talk about character as well, like giving their best when they do something. Talk about character, developing their character. It's not just, limiting to learning, right? So I want to encourage maybe some of us, how do you encourage joy of learning? How do you encourage them to enjoy learning? Okay, so one of you mentioned, I constantly remind myself to avoid saying things like, if you don't do this, I'll give you more homework. That's a good one. All right. Okay, yeah. So, so sometimes it's the questions we ask our children, parents. When you see, when a child first come back from school, what do you say? Are we very stressed? And when we ask them things like, have you done your homework? Is there homework today? Is that the first question you should ask your child? So I want to encourage us, talk about helping them enjoy learning. You can ask them, hey, how was school today? Do you have fun in school today? Because learning is supposed to be fun, right? It's how you promote learning, right? Do you make any new friends today? That's social skills, right? Do you learn something interesting today? How about that? Asking such questions, to really help them to see that learning is supposed to be fun. Get them to be curious. So to answer one of your questions, how to get them awake, nurture curiosity. Nurture curiosity. Get them to be curious. Get them to be capable, right? Right? Ask them, get them to ask questions, to be curious. When you nurture curiosity, you will help them to enjoy learning. I like what Ivy said, it's all right to let our kids fail and repeat the same class. So hopefully this would make a wake-up call for them. Can we use money to reward them if they do extra homework? I found it works for my child. Sometimes incentives has a part to play. Yes, I think it's okay to do, but not to do it long-term, but sometimes to give them some incentives. That's called extrinsic motivation, but you have to do a bit of intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is focused on the learning. Help them to enjoy learning. So do a bit of both, intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. How do you find the balance between focusing on learning and performance and managing the need for them to get the work done? I want to encourage you, in my own experience as a parent, when you encourage them to enjoy learning, right? And look forward to school. You see that? Enjoy learning, look forward to school. And encourage them to give their best in whatever they do, you see? Because you want them to learn, you want them to improve. When you focus on that over a period of time, you'll find that results will fall into place. All right, you got to trust the process. When you are more holistic, you focus on that, the results will fall into place. Because when a child learns to give their best, when a child learns to enjoy learning, sooner or later you'll see that they will actually do very well in their results. Okay, so I want to encourage all of you to trust in the process to enjoy learning. All right, now I need to move on because there's a lot of contents to cover. So when you talk about creating an environment, I also want to talk about mental health as well. Okay, so mental health safety, right? When you talk about safety today, we need to talk about mental health, right? So it's mental health is the way a child think and feel about themselves and the world around them, right? Their worldview, right? So parents, how you parent your child will shape their worldview and their view about themselves. Now, I like this statement: children should be co-developers of learning, not empty vessels to be filled up. All right. Okay, so isn't that an interesting statement? All right. Yeah, so get them involved. Don't just sign up whatever things you want. Help them to expose them to different things and get them to develop their interests, right? Get them involved in learning, right? Okay, one of you said, how to make subjects interesting. That's an interesting question. I think it's how you talk about the subject. Talk about science, as I said, nurture curiosity. Talk about math, tell them that math teaches you to be logical, and tell them that when they learn to be logical and learn to develop their logical skills, there's a lot of good value. And tell them when they learn to be good in math, when next time when they buy things, no one will cheat them. Okay, and you can actually Google this, incorporate how to incorporate maths in certain fun things that you play with your children. All right. All right. So like what someone said, your home environment, do you tolerate mistakes? Right? Do you encourage curiosity and exploration? Do you help them to learn at their own pace? Is there sufficient time for play? All right. Remember, children can learn in different settings. So parents, I want to remind all of us about our parental anxieties. You know, sometimes we get anxious. So when a child makes a mistake, we get anxious. All right. You got to normalize mistakes. You got to say that mistakes is part of life. Okay. You learn from your mistakes. Mistake is a great teacher because it teaches you things. Right. So parents, is how you view mistakes. It's how you respond to mistakes is also important. All right. So that is important for their mental safety and get them to see that, you know, we can be smart and intelligent in different ways, not just homework, right? There's different ways. There's so many different strengths that you can develop. Don't be so narrow in the way we define intelligence. All right. All right. So someone made a comment here. My husband said that it's important for children to enjoy learning. I will always tell my girl that whatever she learns now will somehow help her in her life. For example, calculation, which is related to math. Problem sums actually teaches how to break a bigger problem smaller. Very good. Because of science, we can grow food and have cars to transport around. Very good. Sometimes get them to see the relevance of what they are learning. Thank you so much for that comment. All right, let's move on. All right, so there's when your child lives in a safe and interesting environment, there was lots of benefits for them. So sometimes teach them safety issues, like if a stranger were to talk to them, how do they manage it, right? Right. Sometimes going, even for people going to toilet, sometimes if you are a mom and you have a boy and you go out to public spaces, a boy goes to a public toilet, again, you got to teach them. When they go to toilet, when someone talks to them in the toilet, they have to learn how to manage it. Sometimes, I'm not saying bad things happen, it could happen, right? So we have to teach them about all these things. And when we do this, when you create a safe, interesting environment, you can be more relaxed. Okay, let's move on to a second ingredient: having a positive learning environment. Right. Remember our theme: becoming the parent you want to be. All right. So right now, I'm going to share with you the different parenting styles. All right. So one of the common parenting style is helicopter parenting. Okay. I'm sure some of you have heard this. Is this good enough? What is the negative side of helicopter parenting? Anybody wants to share? All right. Okay, so you see that? So, helicopter parent, if you become a helicopter parent, you will overparent, right? You will overparent, and that is not very healthy. Yeah, it stifles their growth. If you want to help your children develop resilience and independence, then you got to hold back. You got to not be a helicopter parent, right? So move on. There's different parenting styles, right? And this how you categorize them is based on the quality of your relationship, warm and accepting, and your expectation and demands. All right. So for instance, if you are cold and unaccepting and you have no demands whatsoever, you are categorized as a neglectful parenting style. All right. And if you are very warm and accepting, that is, your relationship is good, but you do not have boundaries, you do not have rules, that's called permissive parenting. And if you are someone that's very demanding, but when it comes to relationship, you tend to be cold, it's more like cold and unaccepting, your child don't feel accepted by you, that is authoritarian parenting style. So in Triple P, the style that we actually, the strategies that we promote, we tend to promote authoritative parenting style, which is, we have our demands, at times we have to be firm and assertive, but we also focus on positive relationship. So we combine, we have a balance of relationship and demands. All right. So parents, and when you think about that, of what kind of parent you want to be, think about adopting an authoritative parenting style. All right. Okay, let's move on. So let's talk about, how do you create a positive learning environment? So the first thing is to spend time with your child, right? So parents, I just want to be real here. I think we are living in a digital world, and parents, a lot of times we get distracted. Even when you spend time with your child, I always hear, I talk to parents all the time. A lot of times parents tell me, that Sometimes a spouse will complain to me about their spouse. I mean, a parent will complain about their spouse, right? They will tell me, oh, my spouse, when they're always on the phone. All right. So parents, when you are with your child, are you really present with your child? Are you mostly on the phone? You get distracted on the phone. And sometimes when you have meals with your child, sometimes I see that, I know that sometimes we are very tired. The iPad is a good way to keep them occupied. But sometimes parents, we need to engage our children. When you have a meal with them, it's good to talk with them. These are good values that we have learned from the past. And we need to do that, engage them rather than just all of us preoccupied with our devices. Okay. What else? So this is part of building your relationship, the warm and accepting part, right? Of parenting style. Speak nicely, use the tone of your speaking tone makes a big difference. Children are very sensitive to our tone. So parents, be mindful of our stress. Sometimes we get angry, we get frustrated. Be mindful. Give yourself a time out. Take a deep breath, right? And then talk to your child. Right? Chat with them, listen to them, learn to listen to them. Sometimes children just like to share their stories, what happened in school. They like to share those stories. Parents, take the time to listen to them, right? And get to know them. Details, who are their friends and things like that. That's how you build a relationship. When a child feels you're listening, you build a connection with them. Share your own experience sometimes, okay? All right, you can talk about even what happened in your workplace so that the child can also know what's happening with yourself as well. All right? Okay, so you can also make comments of some of things you observe in your child, and maybe talk about topics that your child may be interested in. So have the back and forth, responses with your child. Do not let the digital devices, take away that relationship. And be affectionate. When your child is still young, they actually enjoy affection, right? When your child gets into puberty, they don't enjoy affection as much, right? You all agree. So parents, at this time, at this phase of your life, don't forget to show affection. Hugs, kisses, all that does communicate love and acceptance to your child. All right? Don't get too distracted that you forget to do these things, parents. All right? We have to manage the great distraction that's happening with the digital world. So that's my first caution I want to give to all of us. We have to manage the distraction. All right? Now, use descriptive praise. So in traditional parenting, in authoritarian parenting, parents only give attention when a child misbehaves, correct? When a child do something right, they never say or do anything. I think a lot of us have experienced that. But in positive parenting, we don't do that. In positive parenting, when you notice your child doing something right, don't ignore. Don't be silent. Respond. Use descriptive praise, right? So you can say, you can say something like, so you tell exactly what you observe, the good thing your child is doing, right? So that your child, when you do that, more likely your child will repeat it. Like you can say something like, Ben, I like it when you are being helpful with the household chores. See that? Just praise that. Just say it for 5 seconds, then you just move on. You don't have to stay with it, right? Give your child attention. Sometimes when you notice them doing something, you don't have to say verbal, it can be non-verbal as well. Just smile at them, acknowledge them, right? Then use incidental teaching. So what is incidental teaching? Triple P. This is another strategy I want to encourage you all to do. Right. So incidental teaching is how you respond when a child comes to you. Sometimes when we are working from home, many of you are working from home, right? You may be on your laptop. When your child comes to you, how do you respond? It's very easy to tell your child, hey, don't disturb me, I'm busy. Can we talk later? You see, think about that. When your child comes to you, that is the time when they are most eager to learn. That's the best time for them to learn. So don't waste that opportunity. So I would encourage parents, when they come to you, I want to encourage you to press the pause button in your work. Turn to them look at them, smile at them, and ask them, and make yourself approachable. And let them then tell you whatever they want to say. They might maybe they are holding a painting, they want to show it to you, and let them comment on the painting, the colors, the textures. And perhaps you can also comment on that as well. You know, when you do that, you will encourage your child to keep practicing that learning. And not only that, when you allow them to talk to you, you are encouraging them to share their own experience, what it's like. So you're improving their verbal skills, you're improving their social skills as well, right? You're getting them to reflect on their work. So parents do that, all right? Okay, so that is incidental teaching. So these are some strategies that you can keep in mind as to create a positive learning environment. You know, this is all part of helping your children to enjoy learning, okay? All right, so let me give you a summary of Triple P strategy. This is a summary of Triple P strategies. If you notice, there's two halves. The upper part of the pyramid is to manage their misbehavior. The lower half of the pyramid is to develop positive relationship and teach them skills and to encourage positive behavior. Lots of times, parents, we tend to focus on managing their misbehavior, right? We focus on misbehavior, we forget. We overlook our relationship. We overlook, you know, how to encourage positive behavior, right? So don't forget, we need to develop our relationship with them and encourage positive behavior using descriptive praise, incidental teaching, and so forth, all right? Okay, we'll now talk about assertive discipline. And this is where we will talk about how to manage their misbehavior, right? So the first two principles is mainly to build a foundation. Now we'll talk about, you see, when your child feels close to you, they are more likely to listen to you, right? That's why Triple P is preventative. When you lay a good foundation in your relationship, you will see that there's less misbehavior because the foundation of a good relationship is already there. Okay, let's talk about assertive discipline. All right, we all know the value of discipline, right? All right, it's very, very important that they have discipline in their emotions, in their behavior, and they need to take responsibility for their actions. All right, let me just respond to text messages. Okay, but boundaries are needed as well because since we also work from home, we sometimes, yes, I agree, boundaries are important. Yeah, sometimes you got to teach them about boundaries, which I'll talk about in a while. Okay, have simple rules, but like I said, don't be rigid, be flexible when your child comes to you. All right, so discipline. How does a lot of times parents say, "I've tried it and it doesn't work." You know, sometimes I tell parents to try certain strategy. They say, "I've tried it, it doesn't work." But maybe you can consider why sometimes discipline does not work. All right. So discipline works best when your child lives in a predictable world. Like I said, you have provided a safe and secure environment, and they get a lot of attention from their positive behavior, and you're developing a good relationship with them. Right. When you're doing that foundation, then you find that discipline works better, and you're using fair, predictable consequences on a consistent basis. Sometimes we are not consistent, you know, and we keep changing, and your child perceives you as being inconsistent and not fair, right? And having reasonable expectation, right? We will talk about these things later on. All right, so strategies. So now I'm going to share with you some assertive discipline strategies. Okay, so this is one of the big issue for a lot of you, how to manage a child's misbehavior. So again, we'll begin with prevention, right? We'll begin with prevention. So prepare in advance. Now, if you are going out with your child, right? So plan ahead of time, okay? Avoid rushing. Maybe if you're going to the bank the next day and your child is going to come follow you along, yeah, so maybe planning it in advance so that you can ensure your child is kept occupied, you know, when you are outside with them. So I think these kind of things just is better. You know, when your child is like even going to certain places, they get triggered. You know, I just want to share, you know, in the past, we used to go to Toys R Us. That was one of our children's favorite places. And before we go to Toys R Us, we always prepare. We always tell our children, remind them of the rules when we go to Toys R Us, that if they want to buy anything, they need to come to me. They need to come to daddy and need to ask daddy whether they can buy or not. And whatever daddy say goes, I'll teach them that simple rule, and no tantrum is allowed. All right. So we prepare, you prep them in advance if you're going to high risk situation, so that they know what is your expectation, and this will prevent unnecessary behaviors. All right. Okay, so set some ground rules like what I mentioned, like going to a place where they will get easily triggered. Set ground rules and remind them of the rules. All right, and ensure that they are following rules. Or if you go to a playground, right, and your child is very active, right, remind them when they go to playground, they got to make sure they are not being bossy or pushing their way around or being aggressive with other children. You got to remind them that and tell them that you will be firm with them if they do not follow the rules. And I teach you later on how to be firm, right? Again, as I mentioned, as you bring them out, when they are demonstrating good behavior, praise them, right? And remember, you got to supervise. Whenever you are bringing them out, your eyes got to be on them. You got to make sure you see the child. So when you see them being misbehaving, you can act quickly. You can act decisively. Okay. Now, another strategy you can use is using plan ignoring for minor misbehavior. Okay. So what is minor misbehavior? Anybody wants to share? What is minor misbehavior? Now, tantrum, throwing a tantrum, is that a minor or major misbehavior? I think throwing tantrum is a major misbehavior, right? So minor misbehavior are things like complaining, whining, right? Whining and complaining. This is minor misbehavior. So when a child shows minor misbehavior, a way to do it, a way to manage them is to ignore them. So how do you ignore them? You pretend that they are not there. All right? Right? So you don't look at them. You don't look at them. So emotionally, you have to be prepared, right? Don't look at them. You just ignore that you're not there. Just keep yourself occupied. After a while, when your child realizes he's not getting your attention, hopefully they will realize no point complaining, no point whining. They will realize they will need to stop. Okay? Right? So a lot of times when a child whine and complain, if you give them attention, they will just repeat it in the future. Okay? So keep that in mind, parents. Okay? Use your voice effectively. When you see them misbehaving, get close to them, call them by name and tell them, okay, Stanley, can you stop doing that and do this instead? Be firm with them. Be firm with them. Like when you go to the playground, right? Be firm with them. Okay, right now, so once we talk about preventative, now we talk about what if, even though we remind them, they still misbehave. When that happens, you have to be prepared to enforce the rules. All right? Be prepared to enforce rules. How can you do that? You can use directed discussion. Directed discussion means simply when the child is not obeying a rule, you remind them. You tell them, you call them by name. You say, Lucy, what is the rule? Remind them, what is the rule? Can you practice the rule right now? Right. So directed discussion is to remind them. When they break the rule, remind them what's the rule and get them to practice the rule. Right? Now, if they don't practice the rule, again, don't throw your frustration on them. Calm down first. Calm down first. And then give them clear instruction. All right? Let them know what you want them to do. Their start instruction, that means you want them to switch off the TV and do something else. Okay? Then there's stop instruction. Maybe they are misbehaving, like jumping. You tell them to stop jumping on the couch. Right? So start instruction, you can do it. Now, what if you say it and they still do not obey you? What do you do? Okay? Don't scream. Don't shout. All right? Don't take the cane and swing. Okay? All right? Don't use threats. Use consequence. So what you do is, all right, you tell them, all right, you tell them straight away. If, let's say they're supposed to go and shower and they are preoccupied with a device. What do? You get close, you tell them, Stanley, look at me. Did you obey my instruction? They know they did not obey. can you surrender your digital device right now? Okay, so you take away the center of distraction and you tell them, you are not going to have access to this device for the next 1 hour. Then you tell them, go and shower right now. See that? You have to act decisively and you implement the consequence. Now imagine if you are consistently doing this every time. They know there's supposed to time for them to shower and they don't shower. And every time they know you're going to act like this. What do you think will happen? What message will your child receive? I want to ask you this in the chat box. If you are consistently doing that, every time your child does not follow your instruction and you implement a consequence, you take away the privilege, what message will your child receive from you if you are doing that every time? All right? Anybody wants to respond in the chat box? What message will your child receive when you do that one? It becomes their thought process, yes. Yes, that you are serious about it. Your child will then get the message that you're going to do it the next time. The problem with a lot of children nowadays is they know. Let them get angry. It's okay for them to get angry and shower unwillingly, but after a while, they will realize that they need to follow the rules. Our goal is not to make them happy all the time, right? Parents, our goal is to make sure that at times we have to be firm with them. Okay? All right. So if we are consistent with them, after a while, they get a message. The problem with a lot of times, a lot of children is they know that their parent is going to let them easy. They're not going to be serious. That's why they keep doing it. Okay. So this is why sometimes this discipline does not work, because we are not consistent. We are giving the wrong message to the child. Okay. So parents, I hope that helps you. Other than taking away your privilege, another way is to back up instructions with quiet time. So how do you do that? Simply, they can remain where they are. Let's say they are, they're throwing a tantrum, right? And they're not willing to surrender their device. You tell them, okay, because of that, there's another consequence. Consequence is you're supposed to be on quiet time for 2 minutes. So 2 minutes, they're not supposed to say anything, right? And you do not engage them. You just leave them and you start the clock and make sure they're silent for 2 minutes. The idea is to calm them down. If they are not silent, you restart the clock. All right. And initially, when you're trying to do this, it's going to be a battle between you and your child because your child is not used to it. But you got to be persistent. After a while, if you keep doing this, your child will get the message. All right. If they don't like quiet time, they will get the message and they will stop. They will learn to comply with your requests. So that's quiet time. Now, timeout is when more serious behavior, when they, instead of leaving them, they can't remain at the scene of the crime. You have to bring them to another place, a boring place. There's nothing to occupy them and they need to just be quiet for 2 to 3 minutes. Same principle. You don't talk to them, just let them be quiet. All right. So these are strategies that you can do. Consequences. When children do not obey, you back it up with these consequences. And you have to assess whether these consequences is it painful for the child? They got to feel that this is something that they don't like. Then they will realize, because the principle is they have negative behavior, you have to respond with negative consequence. Then they go to the grandparents. All right. So that's someone commented, right? Yes, you got to, sometimes I'll talk to you later on about working as a team. You got to talk to your grandparents to be cooperative as well. Okay, if you take away problems, yeah. Well, the whole idea of time management, that's a good question from Hui Min. If you take away problem activity, you see, when you actually have a routine, your routine is time management, right? So which means time for them to shower, and instead of showering, they play with the gadget. So when you take away the problem activity, you're actually teaching them time management. Okay, Hui Min, I hope you understand what I'm saying. When you take away the gadget, you're teaching them time management. You're telling them, time for you to stop playing with the gadget and go and shower, right? So actually, by taking away the problem activity, you are teaching them to be disciplined in using their devices. If you're not disciplined, there will be a consequence. Hope that answers your question. All right. Okay, so these are strategies you can use to manage, to practice assertive discipline, to be a, to practice authoritative parenting. Any other questions? There are quite a lot of questions already. I hope I've tried to answer them. Now let's look at a case study. All right. Okay, so Stacy and her husband both traveled at times in their work. This is an actual case study. I spoke to them. And because they're always busy traveling, they don't spend as much time with their daughter. They only have one daughter. And their primary 4 daughter, Chloe, recently has been struggling with school refusal, which means she struggles to even go to school, right? Mom found out that a few of her friends have been making fun of her and isolated her. But is that a good enough reason to not go to school? When Chloe gets really angry, she physically hits the mom, right? She physically hits the mom. Chloe has done her own research and realized that homeschooling is good. And when I spoke to the mom initially, she said, my daughter is very street smart. I said, really? Street smart. But what about going to go to school? You see, and then the dad feels the daughter has the dad has another perspective. The dad shared that the daughter has little self-control and has been allowed to get her own way with temper tantrums from a young age. All right? Okay, so I want you all to comment here right now. This is an actual case study, all right? All right, so what do you think is happening with Chloe? What is going on with Chloe? Anybody likes to comment? All right, so we can see that Chloe is struggling to be disciplined. Right? She seems to, when she doesn't feel like doing something, she just go with her own feelings or whatever, right? And maybe she misbehaved to get more attention. Someone said Chloe is very resourceful. True, but you still need to go to school, right? One day when you work, you still need to show up at work, right? You got to show up. You got to be, that not everything is you can just do how you feel like doing, whatever you feel. You got to be disciplined, all right? So what's happening here? I spoke to the mom, right? I spoke to the mom, and the mom admitted there are many, many times she did not set limits on her daughter. And I asked her why. She said she's very tired because she traveled, very busy. She's very tired. Right, and over the time, she allowed the daughter to get away with a lot of things. There was no proper boundaries. All right, the daughter thing, the rules does not apply to her. She can do whatever she wants. All right, so that's why they are now facing this problem with Chloe. You see that? So parents, I want to encourage all of you. You've got to lay a good foundation. All right, there are times you have to be firm. You have to be assertive with them. And it starts when they are young, throwing tantrums. You got to be firm with them. When it comes to routine, daily routine, some routine, you got to be firm with them. Right? You see that? Yeah. So you got to have a balance of both, right? You can't just be a permissive parent. And the parenting style that Stacy has is a permissive. She's very permissive. She's not learning to be authoritative, right? Okay, let's move on right now to the 4th principle, which is having realistic expectations. All right. Okay, any questions here about assertive discipline before I move on? Feel free, parents, to share any other questions about this. Okay. So I'm sharing this case study to help you to also think about how the foundation that you're laying with your children right now. Okay, it's important we lay a good foundation. Help them to manage the things early on, and you will avoid bigger issues when they become a teenager. All right. Okay, there's a comment for this case study. What was the outcome? Okay, so the outcome was, the parents realized that there are a lot of things have been set in place with your daughter, and they're going to get a counselor. They're going to engage a private counselor for their daughter. They're actually now in a very difficult place, because even when I try to get them to practice assertive discipline, they find that the daughter just does not listen, and the daughter is very used to it, and they find it very, very difficult. So literally, they need a neutral party to come in and talk to their daughter and manage their daughter, right? You see that? They've come to that stage, all right? So I want to encourage all of us, when you build your relationship early on and lay a good foundation, it doesn't have to come to that stage, all right? Where you are learning to be firm with them, you find that they will then listen to you, and you're able to have the good balance. Okay, a comment here, they feel that when we are firm to stop something or read, instead of playing with reading time, I'm forcing them to do what I want. How to make them understand. Sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes it's not just a one-talk thing. Sometimes you got to understand. That was a good question from, Minakshi. That's a good question. Sometimes you got to ask, why is it, you say that when you try to be firm with them, they just want to play, keep playing. Sometimes you got to ask, what is it about them? Are they feeling very, sometimes why is it a child wants to keep playing? Is it because they don't have enough time to play? There's different, you got to think through what is the issue, why your daughter doesn't like to read. Maybe she just doesn't like to read. Sometimes we can't force them. You can't force a habit on your daughter. You can't. My younger daughter, Renee, did not like reading in the beginning. The time when she developed reading was when the Harry Potter series came. And that was when she was in primary 4, primary 5. That's when she started reading. Whereas my older daughter started reading at a very young age. Children are sometimes different. So if you want to develop reading habits, sometimes it's find something that they are interested in. Go to the library, get them to start small. We start somewhere. Maybe they pick something, maybe a comic book or something like that. You got to start small to slowly develop their reading, their interest in reading. Can we cane on a butt as a last resort, say 3 strokes for extreme serious behavior reversal or out of control misbehavior? Okay, thank you for that question, Ivy. Yeah. Now in Triple P, we discourage parents from using physical punishment. Okay, we discourage it. All right, so as I said, you got to be firm. Take away the consequences. You got to sit down with your child and talk about rules and consequences. All right, and be clear about the consequences and come up with the consequences. That's going to be painful on the child, like taking away a privilege. Certain things that that it will hurt. It's like something that is negative on them. So use those consequences rather than using physical punishment. Because when you use physical punishment, sometimes we get angry, we get frustrated, and the child will just feel that it's, they instead of learning discipline, they just know that you are frustrated. That's all. Okay. Okay, so one of you said, my daughter started reading Harry Potter. She couldn't see the story in the storybook before the movie. Oh, okay. So you're saying sometimes watching a movie helps them to see, helps them to visualize. It's true. We're living in a digital world, and children get stimulated by visual stimulation rather than books. That's the reality of today's world. Sometimes kids are like that, How do you reason with a child who thinks homeschooling is sufficient? So sometimes the child gets exposed to all this content in the internet, right? Yeah. So you got to talk to them, Yes, you got to talk to them about. You got to talk to them that learning is not just academics. It's not just that. You got to open their mind. The learning is also about social skills, teamwork, and these are things. And learning to to live, to how do so these are skills like teamwork and social skills that are important, right? and that you can't necessarily learn in homeschooling, you know, sometimes, right? Yeah. So I think it's you got to reason with them, try to think about why is it that they prefer homeschooling, and try to talk about those issues, you know. Don't say no, engage them in a conversation and be curious as to why they prefer homeschooling. All right. So if you resist and you know and react in a negative way, it's not going to help your daughter. Engage them, be curious as to why they prefer homeschooling, and engage them. Right? Yeah, okay. All right, so let's move on. Next thing is realistic expectations. All right. Okay, so all right, so it's important to have realistic expectations, like to check whether you have realistic expectation or unrealistic expectations. Sometimes you can actually compare, ask yourself, what do you expect, right? Am I being, is this realistic for my child? Is this rule necessary? Can my child understand this? Sometimes they may not understand what you're trying to say. What are your expectations? You got to be clear and specific. Like when you say, tell them to clean their room. Clean is a very generic word. It's better to be more specific, like, okay, can you put away the toys on the floor? Put away the toys on the floor, rather than just say clean your room. Okay, so be very clear in your instruction. All right, so sometimes you can compare with other parents to check whether your expectation is realistic or not. Right? Okay, let me check on the chat box. Yes, yeah. So Kenneth, thank you for your reply about benefit of going to school, right? They can have more friends and things like that. Yeah. All right. So, okay. So the other form of expectations of yourself. You know, parents, sometimes we can have a very perfectionistic mindset. You know, a lot of parents, you feel that you have to be the perfect parent, and when you make one mistake, you feel guilty. You know, I wonder how many of you feel that way. You know, you feel guilty, you feel that you have to be perfect. I'm like that in the past. You know, in my own parenting journey, I can have a perfectionistic mindset, and I have to learn to tell myself that it's okay to make mistakes, right? And it's okay to acknowledge those mistakes. All right. So I think it's important for us to see that we cannot be a perfect parent, and we all make mistakes. It's okay. When you make mistakes, talk to your child, acknowledge, and just apologize and learn from it. And by doing that, you're role modeling that to your child. And your child in the future, when they make mistakes, they will see that it's normal, and they will also talk to you, and they will also apologize as well. Okay. Okay. So I got this interesting video that I want to share. So parents, what kind of parent do you want to be? This whole theme is becoming the parent you want to be. Do you want to be a perfect parent, or do you want to be a good parent? Okay, so this is a question I want to ask all of us.
I believe this is the mark of a good parent. Because at the end of the day, we're all imperfect. No matter where we started or where we're going, we are all human beings who are going to make mistakes. We're going to say things and do things that hurt our kids. We're going to not say and not do things that hurt our kids intentionally or unintentionally. It just happens. And if we could normalize, number one, that they can go to therapy and there's not going to be anything wrong with them and they don't need to feel ashamed. And number two, that we don't really know what we're doing and we're just trying our best, and genuinely apologize. Not, well, if you didn't do that, I wouldn't have to, or I'm sorry, but like genuinely, like you didn't deserve this, I shouldn't have done that. We're on the right track. You're on the right track.
All right, so parents, so I want to ask us this question. Can you reply on the chat box? Do you want to be a good parent, which is G, or do you want to be the perfect parents, which is P? G or P? All right. Okay, parents. So, all right, I hope you see that. You know, a lot of us, it's our upbringing. We were raised up by parents who probably did not tolerate mistakes. And as a result, our worldview is we cannot make mistakes. So don't bring that to your child. Be the parent that you want to be. Remember, be the parent that you want to be. Mistakes is normal. It's okay. It's fine. Be kind to yourself. It's okay to make mistakes, right? And I have to learn to be kind to myself as well. All right. So I hope that is helpful. All right. So now we go to the there's another comment there. Right. So all of you said good parent. Fantastic. Huh? So don't be a perfect parent. So let's look at another case study. Is that okay? So Ms. Nusa has a primary 5 son, Jeffrey, who struggles with motivation in his studies. All right. And in comparison, they have a younger son. This is an actual case study here, who's more academically inclined and been doing well. So can you see that? Jeffrey, the older son, is not doing so well. The younger son is doing well. Now, I want you to imagine if you were in Jeffrey's shoes. It's not easy, huh? It's not easy. At times, Ms. Nusa got so frustrated, right? She uses the exercise band to hit him. The dad also berates him, right? You know, I mean, the mom told me there are times the dad called the son stupid, you know, right? Yeah, so it came to the point where the son, whatever it is, has very little motivation in doing a homework, you know? The son rather be hit than doing his homework. Can you imagine? It has come to that stage, right? Then he told his school counselor that he feels lousy about himself and he wants tuition for math. But then when I talked to the mom said she's not willing for him to have tuition because she wants him to make more effort first before seeking tuition. All right? Okay, so I want you all to comment on the chat box. First of all, what do you think is going on with Jeffrey? Why do you think he might be not so motivated? See, sometimes we got to see why is it our child is not motivated? What do you think might be happening with Jeffrey? Anybody likes to respond to the chat box? Why? What do you think? Low self-esteem. Thank you for that, Joseph. I think you're right. Yeah, he may have a problem with the math teacher. Yes, because of comparison. You're absolutely right. Right? So as I talk to the parents admit that there are times they compare him to the younger brother. All right? So parents, can you see that? You know? So what is not motivating Jeffrey is because of all this comparison and he has low self-esteem on himself. Right? And that didn't help him. So that's why and the reason why he's not motivated is not because he's lazy. He just have this lack of self-confidence, that mindset. And then I asked I asked the mom, hey, why don't you, your son actually asked for tuition. That's good one, right? Why don't you let him have tuition because he requested, right? The mom said, no, I want him to show more initiative. Yes, I agree with what Hai Tian said, but I encourage the mom, look, your son requests for it. Why don't you let him have it? Don't have, you know, you're expecting your son to jump over the hoop, you know, when he hasn't even learned to walk. So I told Ms. Nusa, you can't just expect your son to just bring the motivation just like that, to be very initiative, because maybe he has no confidence. Let him go for tuition. Try to encourage him to have a bit of success. Then you can expect the other things, right? The good thing is Ms. Nusa listened to my advice and she agreed and she appreciated me for speaking the truth. And she then enrolled her son for tuition to help the son boost up his confidence. Okay? So expectation is very important. And parents, some of you ask questions about sibling issues. So it's important that you don't compare. Huh? Every child is different. Right? Don't say things, hey, why can't you be like, don't say things like that. It doesn't help them. All right? When they go to class, they're already comparing with the other children. When they come back home, don't compare. Everybody's different. All right. So with sibling relationships, some of you ask how to manage sibling relationship. I would just say, avoid trying to be a referee. When they fight, avoid being a referee. Huh? Encourage them to negotiate and resolve their conflicts. But have simple rules. Tell them no hitting and no putting each other down, like using profanities and making fun of each other, using nicknames in a negative way, right? Simple rules for them. Okay? So I hope that is helpful for all of us. The message you give to your child is very important, huh? How to help them. Sometimes when a child is not motivated, there are different reasons why they are not motivated. Okay, let's move on to our last principle, which is taking care of yourself as a parent. All right? Okay, so there's one more chat. Is it okay to learn from one another? Like highlighting a certain good strategy, like planning timetable. Yes, I think you can learn from each other, from the children can learn from one another. Yeah, that's great, but don't compare. So don't avoid saying, can you be like him? No. Instead, you can say, wow, look at him. He has this great idea. He has planned his timetable. I think that's a good strategy. So focus on the strategy. Don't focus on the person. All right? Don't say things like, can you be like this person? Don't do that. Avoid doing that, right? Focus on the strategy. Good question there. Okay, let's move on to the last principle, taking care of yourself as a parent. All right? Okay, so sometimes when I talk to parents always say sometimes they have no time for self-care. Say Singapore life is so busy, right? They always tell me, they are so busy, they got no time for self-care. Now, self-care is important. If you don't take care of yourself, parents, how are you going to be a positive parent? It's very difficult, It's very difficult because your stress, you will end up venting your stress on your child. Okay, let's watch this fun video about self-care tips from a mom.
When you wake up, allow yourself 5 minutes to just breathe.
Oh,
Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Make sure you enjoy it.
let's go.
There is always time to squeeze in a quick exercise routine.
Have you got the sun cream?
A tidy house is a tidy mind. Give yourself a little pamper every now and then. Put some motivational quotes around the home to give yourself a little lift. Remember, your body is a temple. Getting enough sleep is so important. Make sure you get an early night.
Yes, self-care tips, right? I think we all have to be realistic. We're all very busy. Sometimes it's hard to find time for self-care. I understand that. Okay, there's another question here. Is it okay to praise other sibling in front of the other? Will it cause jealousy, rivalry between the sibling? Right? Yeah, I think like I think just make sure you want to praise them. You make sure you also praise the other person as well. And like I said, praise what they are doing, the things that they are doing. Just praise them. Instead of saying, "Wow, Jenny is a good girl." Jenny is an obedient girl. When you say things like in front of the other child, it may not be as good. I wouldn't advise that. When you're alone, it's okay to use words like, but when you do that in front, when you say things like a child's perception, the child can just, it's how they interpret what you're saying. Sometimes they may misinterpret what you're saying. All right. So I hope that helps. Okay. So just even sometimes we are drawn to one child because the child is doing well, but be intentional to look at the other child and identify what are their strengths, right? Your other child also has strengths, right? You just got to reflect a little bit more. Maybe he may not be good in academics, but maybe he has good character. He's very kind. He's very helpful. And character is also important, and talk about that, all right? So I hope that is helpful, all right? Okay, so I want to talk about self-care, So what is your preferred self-care activity? Anybody like to share on the chat box? What is one thing you do to make sure that you practice self-care? Sleep. Thank you. That's a very good one. Anything else? Okay. Exercise regularly. Fantastic. All right. So there you are. So these are things that, it's important for us to do. Having your me time is important. Parents, sometimes you think, no, I've got to love my children. Actually, when you have self-care, you're showing your love for your child as well. Because when you take care of yourself, you're role modeling to your child. And then you can be a better parent for your child, right? So don't feel guilty about self-care, about having me time, right? You're doing that so that you can be have better capacity to be a positive parent. All right. So think about what are your strategies. Sometimes it's also mental health. Self-care can also be mental health. Like it's okay to have me time. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to sometimes sleep in. It's okay to say no to some people. It's okay to treat myself. I don't have to have many friends. I can just have a few friends. Okay. So sometimes we are very hard on ourselves. All right, parents, be kind to yourself. Okay, so these are some strategies, all right? Okay, so in Triple P, we have a few different strategies. The first one is balancing work and family, all right? So try to reduce unnecessary commitments. Sometimes parents, you have to ask yourself, are you getting excessive work? Is your work, are you now in a situation where your work is too much, making too much demands on you? If that's the case, maybe you want to see how you can manage that better. Sometimes when we have too much demands, it's hard for us to make our family, to give time and attention to our family, all right? Okay, so have good transition times routines, right? So everyone knows what to expect, all right? So for example, like when you going, I remember I spoke to this one mom who told me, moment she goes to office, so the moment she finishes work, before she leaves the office, she spends 10-15 minutes meditating first. Right? She reminds herself to leave her stress in the office, not bring the stress home. All right, so the transition times between work and home is important. All right, so when you go back home, you can start your second shift, which is to be a parent. All right, so you don't want to bring your stress back home, right, parents? So learn to be mindful, right? Okay, so have your strategy. When you go back home, maybe you can tell your child, the first 15 minutes, please don't bother mommy. Okay, or first half an hour, because mommy, when I come back from work, mommy is very tired. I need to go and shower, right? I need to go and shower. Then after shower, then you can come and talk to mommy. Sometimes you have to plan all these things, all right, so that you don't get unnecessary triggered, right? So teach your child to be independent. Like I said, independent play, learning to occupy themselves is also important. And sometimes parents, part of life is LV, thank you for your suggestion, hide somewhere. Huh? That's good. Okay. Sometimes it's, if you can organize good childcare, and you have time for you and your spouse to spend time together, that can be helpful. Sometimes if both of you are working and you don't have time for each other, that's not going to help your marital relationship. All right. So give yourself those times, All right. So another way to manage self-care is to manage your negative thinking. So sometimes the reason why we get stressed is because we have unhealthy thinking. So we can learn to move away from unhelpful thoughts to more helpful thoughts. All right. Okay. For example, right. So this is unhelpful thoughts. So when you go back home, when your child is misbehaving, maybe your unhelpful thoughts is, he knew I was tired, he still come and kacau me, right? Sometimes your child is not because they deliberately want to kacau you. Maybe it's not just you are tired, but your child is also tired, right? They're just tired themselves. She did that on purpose to upset me. So sometimes we personalize problems, when a child, you think they're deliberately trying to upset you, not necessarily. Maybe she's bored, she just got bored, that's all. Sometimes when you're trying to help your child with your homework, maybe you're thinking he's never going to learn, right? Instead of thinking in that way, you can think it will take time for him to learn. All right, so sometimes our thoughts can bring stress to our life. Or sometimes when you think your child is always, maybe your child has a very sensitive personality, you think your child is bad. You just think that she's bad. You've got to separate the person of your child and their behavior. Sometimes their behavior can be annoying, but don't label your child as being bad. All right. Yeah, so positive thinking is very important. Thank you for that. Yeah, so application. So how do you practice managing your thoughts? So whenever you feel you're getting upset or stressed, be aware of it. Then press the pause button. Okay? Maybe you got to put a sticker in your house. Press the pause button. All right? Just put a sticker to remind you. Every time you get stressed, press the pause button. Like watching Netflix, right? Sometimes you watch Netflix, wow, fun movie, press the pause button because you want to go and get your snacks. So press the pause button. Then give yourself a timeout. All right? So after you have the timeout, you come back, you're calmer. During your timeout, you tell yourself, don't throw your frustration on your child. Identify your negative thoughts, right? Don't personalize things. Manage your negative thoughts. All right? And then tell yourself you want to be a good role model. You want to be the parent you always want to be, right? Remember, you want to be the parent you always want to be. And then go back. So self-talk to yourself and then go back and manage your child. All right? So the timeout, pressing the pause button is important, parents. All right? Okay, so work as a team. Finally, work as a team. Talk to your partner, all right? And making sure that the loads are shared. You don't feel that you have to manage everything yourself. When you disagree, because we marry our opposites, we tend to have differing views. Don't disagree in front of the child. All right? Back each other up in front of the child. Like if you are passive, your child is your spouse is more, is more assertive. Let them manage the child. Okay? Complement each other. Right? But if you feel that they are too aggressive, when you are alone in the room, talk to your spouse to tone down the aggressive, right? To be more assertive, not aggressive. Right? And a lot of times it's all about finding problem solving. Don't blame, avoid blaming each other. No, avoid blaming your grandparents, avoid blaming your spouse. Just try to problem solve, find a solution. All right? Sometimes a lot of time life is about finding problem solving, finding a solution rather than blaming people. Okay? All right, so work as a team. All right, so we've come to the end of our webinar. Okay, so just to summarize what we talked about, remember, make sure you are giving your attention to your family. So today we talked about the power of positive parenting. First principle, creating a safe and interesting environment. Second thing, build a positive learning environment. Okay, so I talked about the joy of learning. Remember, learning is a different setting. And I talk about building your relationship with them and encouraging desirable behavior, right? Using assertive discipline, right? Avoid using aggressive discipline. All right, be preventative, but act decisively and consistently when they are not being compliant. Have realistic expectation, be a good parent, not a perfect parent. Take care of yourself, right? Practice self-care so that you can be a positive parent to your child and increase your capacity. Now, parents, I want you all to imagine if you practice some of these strategies. Some of you think, oh yeah, very difficult, my child will never listen. I want you to imagine a positive outcome, right? Where if you were to practice some of this, one or two of these strategies, be open that your child can change, right? The child can improve, right? Be open to that. And I hope that motivate you to really practice your strategies. All right, so we talked about these 3 strategies, right? Okay, so right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a poll because I want you to think about what strategies, I want you to choose what strategies you're going to practice with your child. Okay, all right, so we're going to have an anonymous poll, just 2 questions. All right, so it's anonymous, so please be authentic. So I'm going to launch a poll right now. Please participate. All right, the first questions. Which idea or strategies discussed are most relevant for you to practice at home? Pick your top 3. Pick your top 3. All right, because we want to encourage you to practice something from what you learn. First one, to be more intentional to become the parent I want to be. Second one, to balance between occupying my child with interesting activities, right? Okay. And allowing them to be co-developers of their learning, right? Third, all right, to learn how to practice authoritative parenting style. All right. The fourth, to give positive attention when the child practices desirable behavior. Okay. Next one, to be responsive when a child approaches me. That's incidental teaching. To plan ahead more and take preventative approach. Perhaps some of you like that. Next one, to use assertive discipline, such as imparting consequences when a child misbehaves, in managing the child's behavior. Next one, to be a good parent, not a perfect parent. To practice self-care regularly so as to increase my parenting capacity. And finally, to ensure I work as a team with my partner and or others at home. All right. So pick your top three. Yeah? Pick your top three. Out of 10 choices, pick your top three. These are strategies that you want to practice at home. All right. Because I want to encourage you to practice it. Because if you don't practice it, then, you know, today's workshop would be, you won't get the best out of today's workshop. Okay. All right. So the second question, what could hinder you from practicing your chosen strategy within the next 2-3 days? So the theory says that you should strive to practice within the next 2-3 days, because if you don't, you might forget. Okay. So I want to encourage you to make a commitment to practice the strategies you learn even in the next 2-3 days. Okay. So what is your biggest hindrance? Is it busy, too tired, lacking energy, fearful of conflict with your child? You don't think your child will listen, not sure how to practice a strategy or others. All right. Okay. So think about what is going to stop you. I want to encourage all of us, right, to to really manage this. Okay, so it's 60%. Yeah, so all right, so we've got like almost 70. We got 75% of participation. So I will now end the poll, right? Okay, let me allow for more people to participate. All right, so we've got 80% already of participation. All right, now if you have any questions, please type it on the chat box. Feel free. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll right now. Okay, so I'm going to share the results. For the first question, the most popular one is, all right, so it sees that 44% chose to balance between occupying my child with interesting activities and allowing them to be co-developers. All right, so that seems to be the most popular. Then the next one is to be more responsive when my child approaches me. All right. Then the third one, third most popular, to be a good parent, not a perfect parent. All right. Okay, so those are the most popular ones. All right. So what could hinder you from practicing your strategy within the next 2-3 days? Yeah, so the biggest thing is too tired and lacking energy. Then followed by too busy and not sure how to practice the strategy. Okay. All right. So for those of you who are too tired, I want to encourage you, all right, to try to see how you can, how you can manage your energy, because it's really worth it when you try to practice some of these strategies. All right. Because when you see your child responding well, I think it's worth it. It's going to reduce your parenting stress. Right. And yeah, and I think you feel good, even though it's challenging, but when you do it, as you do it, you'll feel good about yourself, right? And Now, some of you said you're not sure how to practice the strategy. Okay, so I'll offer you a solution to that. Okay, I'll offer you a solution shortly. All right. Okay, so let's move on. Question time. Please feel free to type in. You've got any questions? All right. Okay, so feel free. It's a question time right now. If you have any question, I know you've already asked. A lot of you have asked a lot of questions throughout the webinars, and I believe I've addressed most of your questions. So if you still have any other question, feel free to ask. Okay, so we'll move on. Okay, so these are some books I can recommend. Those of you who like to read, these are books I'll recommend. First book is 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. So I've read this book. It's a very good book about building. How do you, practice your child's love language, express your child's love language, and you can build, by doing that, you build connection with your child, right? Next book is called Scream-Free Parenting. So I like this book because this book teaches you how to practice self-care, how to use assertive discipline, and not to throw your frustration on your child. All right, so these are good books that I've read that have helped me. So you can also consider. Okay, there's a question here. Is it normal that sometimes my kid will say things like, I am so stupid, it's all my fault? Does this show negativity behavior on my child? Yes, I think if your child were to say that, if it's just one-off, it's not a big deal. But if it's something habitual, then I think you would want to, it's a reflection of something deeper. It could be a reflection of something deeper, that the child's self-esteem might be struggling with a low self-esteem. All right. Sometimes when a child try to do a certain thing, maybe they try to do math, cannot solve the math, then the child compares himself with another person, and the child may come to a conclusion that he is stupid, that is a premature conclusion, right? Right? Yeah. So encourage the child that to have a growth mindset. Don't have a fixed mindset. When you think you are not good, that's a fixed mindset. Help them have a growth mindset. All right. So this is another good book, Growth Mindset. You can actually get, so growth mindset is teaching your child. As long as you put in effort, you will become more intelligent. Right? As long as you put in more effort, you can develop your intelligence, right? Another question: with multiple kids and very different personalities, it's sometimes very difficult to find a style that works. It's true. Sometimes have to deal with them differently. But then they are the ones that compare and say we are not fair. What would you suggest on how to handle this? It's true. Yeah, I think it's good to have the same principle that you will teach all your children. For example, managing their digital devices, have the same principle, right? Tell them that this principle applies to everybody. But when a child gets older, they can have more screen time. Younger child has less screen time, right? If you look at the guidelines, that's what the guidelines given. So you tell them, all right, so they may have more screen time, but the principle is still the same, right? Yeah, so you keep telling them, and so certain things like now, time management is still the same principle, works for everybody. Maybe some child, they have better time management than the others, but the other child may think you're being unfair. But teach them the principle, whether it's time management, whether it's discipline, giving your best, whatever you do, these are principles that you can share with everybody, right? Like avoid making the comparison. When you make the comparison, that's when a child will feel that you're being unfair. But I hear you, LV, sometimes the child would just like to compare. That is normal. It's very normal, What is a good way to handle a comment as, I won't have to listen to you when I reach this age. Okay, all right. Okay, so maybe you try to identify, maybe your child, one of the reasons why your child says that, maybe the child may feel that I ask yourself, what is the reason why your child may be saying that? There may be different factors at play here. Is it because the child feels that he doesn't have a voice? He doesn't have a choice, that a lot of times that things are being decided for him. You got to figure out, so sometimes it's good at different ages to give more choices for your child. All right. Allow your child to have autonomy, different different times. That's important. So you got to think through, why is that happening at your home? It's important that your child has a voice. It's important you get them involved in, when you create rules, when you're making decisions, get them involved in that, so that they feel that they have a voice. So I hope that answers your question. Will using phone locking apps that limit screen time be recommended? I worry it's taking away too much independence and does not promote. Well, I think you try to do both. So I think a lot of parents have used apps and it has been successful. Yes. So I think you talk about the principle of discipline, right? And talk to them about that and teach them how to do it. Let them practice it. Maybe you can even have a trial period for them to practice it, right? And then when you feel that they're not developing it, again, you go back to them and tell them, look, right? You give them a trial period for them to try to practice it. And tell them if they don't practice it during the trial period, then you will have to use the app, right? Yeah. So it is. You can always go back and forth. There's never nothing is fixed on stone. Some parents have found it successful to use apps and it works, right? But I also get what you're saying. So I think it's good to try to do both and always communicate with your child. Teach them why you're doing it. You want them to develop discipline in using their phone apps. Yeah, so CN, you replied to William's comment that they can even bypass it. It's true. Children are very smart, very savvy these days. So how to make my son understand me if I tell do homework and study when you're free, he feel like, not like, so sometimes angry, but he not understand that, want to help him. Okay, so all right, yeah, so sometimes I know that your intention is good, Ananti, you have good intention, you want them to. So again, I shared again, is you want them to focus on learning and don't focus on doing homework as a chore, right? How you communicate, tell them to encourage curiosity, encourage the joy of learning. So focus on learning, don't focus on performance. Don't keep reminding them about homework. It becomes like you have to get good results. You have to do your homework. So it becomes like a chore. It becomes like a performance. Focus instead of learning. Tell them to be curious. Tell them it's fun when they learn new knowledge. When they develop their skills, it's actually very fulfilling. It's very motivating, right? Focus on learning. That will be my feedback to them. Okay, my colleague advised me to check their phones and messages, but my girl refuses. She said it's a privacy. What should I do? Okay, yes, I think it's good to build trust. I think what I'll share with you what we did. All right, when my daughter was younger, when she turned 13, right? In those days there was only Facebook. There was no, we didn't have all the other stuff that we have today. So I remember my wife spoke to my daughter, told her, okay, allowed her, because in Facebook you can only become, you can only get into Facebook when you become 13 years old, right? Before that you're not allowed to. So we told our daughter, we allow her to get into Facebook, get to social media, but she's got to allow us. She got to add, my wife as one of her, add her in as one of her friends. And we told her, the reason is once in a while we want to check on her. How is she doing online? Because we explained that our role is not to monitor or 24/7, but to just check on her. How is she managing her online space? It's only when we talk to her, she understands where we are coming from, then she agreed to do it, right? So that's how we did it. So maybe you need to talk to your daughter that one of your responsibilities is to just try to check on her to ensure that she's managing her digital space well. Hopefully she understands where you're coming from, because maybe your daughter thinks that you're trying to control her and things like that. Try to use that approach, okay? When is a good time for them to have their own phones? Yeah, that's a very good question. Well, I think some parents, what they do is they don't get a smartphone so quickly, right? And because if you want a phone just to communicate, you can actually not get a smartphone, right? Yeah, so, but if you do get a smartphone, you got to have terms and conditions. Explain to them a smartphone is a privilege, it's not a right. So you got to talk to them about terms and conditions, right? And tell them that you still have authority. So what are the terms and conditions? Making sure that there's time management on the phone. So come up with a few rules, simple rules that they need to follow, right? So maybe you need to get them to, maybe you need to write down, get them to sign and make sure that it is very, very clear, all right? So tell them that if they don't have practice proper time management, it's your authority to manage to take away their privilege. Okay, so make sure you have terms and conditions before you give them the phone. Okay, so I hope that is helpful. Yeah. All right. Okay, so let's move on. I try to stick to our time, which is 3:30. Okay, so I just want to remind everybody, thank you for all the questions. How do you let them focus on learning if there's always a deadline for homework? It's true. Very good question, Eng. It's not easy. All right. There's no quick solution. All right. You just got to teach them to manage it. Talk about your own, how you cooperate, role model it. It's not a easy thing to do when you have deadlines and you still want to learn. Just like me working. When I do my work, when I prepare for a workshop, I want to learn, I want to prepare it well, but I also have deadlines, right? But you've got to see how you can combine both and teach them that that's a reality in life, that you got to do both. You got to learn, at the same time, meet deadlines, you got to practice part of life. So role model it, teach them how to do it, right? Okay, so I remind everyone, do attend our workshop next week, Raising Confident, Competent Children. And my colleague Vanessa will be doing it. Okay, so do come along and we will talk about issues like managing, a lot of independent skills, managing how to build independent skills, how to manage their social skills, how to, build respect and stuff like that. So I think it'd be very, very useful, and how to build up their self-esteem. So please do attend next week as well. Now, we value your feedback, so I want to encourage all of you to please scan the QR code in front of you to give us your feedback, right? We'd like to hear from you, or click on the link that is being posted in the chat box, right? Okay, so we have posted there's two links. The first link is the feedback form. Okay, so please click on the first link. Now, all right. Now, if you feel that earlier, if some of you feel you're not sure how to practice strategies, we have another solution for you. Like as I mentioned, you can consider enrolling in the individual consultations. So this is it's free of charge. It's because it's fully subsidized by the government. So you can enroll for this. You'll have 4 individual consultations online over Zoom, where we can talk about the behavior that you're concerned about in your child. Then we'll teach you how to practice the PPP strategies. All right. So those of you who are not sure, you feel like you want to get more help, you can actually sign up for these individual consultations. You can scan the QR code in front of you, or you can click on the second link that's been posted on the chat box. All right. Okay, so again, if you haven't filled up the feedback form, please do scan the QR code in front of you or click on the first link. All right, parents, thank you so much for attending the workshop today. All right, so I will see you. All right, we will see you next week. All right, I hope you found it helpful, and we'll see you next week. All right. Okay, so I'm going to stop share right now. Yes. You can, parents, if you like, you can exit the Zoom platform right now. Thank you so much once again for attending today's workshop, and see you again next week.